Go for it.
Welcome back to the Fatheads Eyewear Studio here in Indianapolis, Indiana for Unverified, the show where we talk all things racing. Very busy week coming up, and it's been a busy week in the past. I went to the 12 Hours of Sebring, have a lot of new Dude Bro sources to talk about on this episode, and we've also got to look ahead to the Thermal Club. Formula One also back. NASCAR had a new winner. A lot of exciting things. And, of course, I'm sitting alongside of my co-host. You know him. You love him. It's Tony Donohue. Hey, Tony. How was your weekend, buddy?
I felt like we did a whole show last night at Denny's when we were there till 3 a.m. kind of discussing racing and your weekend down in Sebring. And I was here at Indy, and we've got an IndyCar race at Thermal coming up on Fox at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday afternoon. Want to make sure that everybody knows the time of that race, and we're going to try to influence people to watch that. So excited for that. We were at Thermal last year. You and I are going to discuss what we did out there, what we saw, what we liked about it. Like you said, we got some Dude Bro sources, things to talk about. But man, oh man, you had like an 8.5 type weekend, 9, maybe even a 10 weekend down in Sebring. You had a lot of fun. Weather looked great. Tell us all about it. We've got Kyle in the chat as well. So if you're looking to chat with us here on Unverified, the chat is open on the Unverified YouTube channel, so be sure to like and subscribe to that. Sebring for you over the weekend. Buddy, you've been talking about it for a long time. You're freshly out of the bunker. How was your weekend?
Yeah, no, it's weird. Like, I kind of feel like I'm back in the game. Like, I've been away for a while. Like, I just haven't been in the paddock. And I've gotten to the paddock again, and boy, oh boy, it was like an avalanche. It was like a fire hose at times of information coming in. Some of it true, maybe some of it not so true, but it's always fun to try to piece things together and find out what exactly is going on in this great sport of ours. What was awesome about Sebring this weekend, really, to me, was a lot of the coverage opportunities that I had. Mm-hmm. Shout out to IMSA.
Yeah.
They shouted our show out on their socials.
Thank you.
They call us a podcast, which we're going to have to work on.
You don't like that word.
I don't like that word. I would say, podcaster is just slightly above influencer, which I hear we have a problem with influencers, by the way. Maybe we'll have to talk about that.
Haven't I been talking about that since episode 1?
It's funny. I'll tell you, Tony, here's what's kind of getting weird about that. And I'm only going to say this, really quickly, but you hear that word a lot in the paddock these days, and almost always it's a negative connotation. So make of that what you will.
Well, like I said, we want to make sure everybody knows what time the race is, because we just, if you're going to be an influencer, you should at least let the people know what
influence.
time. You should influence when the race is. I said that on episode 1 when the article came out that was a marketing strategy. So if that's the way that they want to do it and that's the route that they want to go, I can be cool with it. But let's make sure it's not just about look at me behind the scenes. It's about informing audiences on when the race is, how the race operates, maybe how long the race is, talk to some drivers, those type of things. I'll get off my soapbox. I know we're early in the show here.
No, it's all good. I'll spin off of that by being a total hypocrite, and I got to influence a little bit for IMSA this weekend. As you guys, I mentioned the post that they talk about Unverified, but I actually got to participate in their chat during the Michelin Pilot Challenge race, which was really fun. I got to talk to a lot of you guys in there. I saw a lot of shout-outs for Unverified, the DL 500 Club.
But that is influencing. That is
Yeah.
You were talking about the race, talking with
Trying to get
drivers,
people to tune in
interacting
for the
with
race.
people.
Yeah.
You had coverage of onboard cameras. You had interviews with drivers down there. That's the way it should be done.
Well, and that's the thing, what was so cool, and again, I get lucky, none of this is planned ahead of time. I wish it was. I wasn't handed the script, but we actually had a really good weekend for drivers that I interviewed. I'm obviously wearing a Hyundai shirt that I got for free. Sorry, I didn't give you my accurate information. You guys have that already, so didn't need to give it to you twice. But the winners in the TCR category were Mason Philippi and Harry Gottsacker. And I talked to
Who?
Harry Gottsacker, that's his name. And I interviewed Mason about our Hyundai Fitness Camp. I got to finally debut the feature with that, where I suffered a lot. I think a lot of people who maybe have sparred with me on Twitter in the past would have enjoyed seeing me suffer a little bit, for sure. And Mason ended up winning the race. Now, they finished second on the racetrack, but the lead car, which was also unfortunately a Hyundai, got DQ'd, so he got the win. And then we got to talk to Nick Tandy, and Nick Tandy is probably the best sports car racer in the world right now. And I'm very honored that Nick kind of gives me the time of day. Nick's a great guy, and I kind of pitched this idea to Team Penske, and they liked it, which was I wanted Nick to narrate a lap of Sebring.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about influencing and partnerships, it was great to do that with Penske. But then IMSA actually helped me out on that too, because I said, would I be able to get some onboard footage to make this feature really, really pop? And they got me the footage, which was really cool. And so I put it together, looked great. And Nick Tandy went and won one of the few endurance races that he has yet to win, which is the 12 Hours of Sebring. He now has wins in the 6 major endurance races in the world: the 24 Hours of Le Mans, 24 Hours of Daytona, 24 Hours of Nürburgring, 24 Hours of Spa, Petit Le Mans, and the 12 Hours of Sebring. So that was really cool. Penske won 2, the first time that's happened at Sebring. First time that's happened at Sebring ever. It was a Porsche won 2, first time since 2008. So really, I thought it was a great weekend. And of course, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Aston Martin. Surely, Tony, I know you're not the biggest IMSA guy in the world, but did you at least see some of the social media content around the Aston Martin?
Yeah, I did. I saw a lot of what you put up there and a lot of what IMSA was doing. And again, we appreciate the shout out. Did Rexy wreck?
Rexy won in class.
Oh, well, that
Rexy won. So that was the other follow-up to the story, is that Rexy kind of put the controversy to rest and really had a good race, beat both of the Paul Miller BMWs and GT Pro.
What was the Valkyrie?
The Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look, you even know the proper name. Now, what was the team name? The Heart of Racing.
Okay, good.
Which this isn't information that's like
the Heart of Racing is their team name.
Well, so here's the thing.
We probably could have done
the
better.
reason they call it the Heart of Racing is that the team actually, all the profits and proceeds that team earns go to Seattle Children's Hospital.
Oh, well, you make me feel like now I sound like an ass.
Well, no.
Well, shout out to them. Shout out to Seattle, where my
awesome.
parents live. So that works.
So here's the thing. So Seattle is where the team
my dad lives.
Is. The team's actually based out of Phoenix, Arizona, but the team owner. You won't know who this is because you're not a gamer, but and it's not something that's necessarily talked about, but it's also not
Nintendo.
a secret. Close.
Oh.
He owns a Valve company, which owns Steam, which you've played my Steam Deck before.
Yeah.
So it's a guy by the name
cool.
of Gabe Newell. So Gabe's a big racing fan, and
it's like a big boy Game Boy.
It's really cool. But here's the thing that I thought was really cool that you're going to be interested in when we talk about IMSA. John Doonan went on, who is the president of IMSA, went on and talked about potential new venues for IMSA going into the future, and specifically mentioned Seattle.
Yeah, baby.
As a potential market where IMSA could end up running a race. So I guess I'll ask you, Tony, since you are a little bit more familiar with that area.
Yeah.
Could you do a decent street race or a road course race somewhere in the Seattle area?
Based on what I know, which is not much about this entire situation, I would imagine you'd want that to be downtown somewhere. Mm-hmm. The Space Needle's kind of separated from like the downtown area where the pier is, where the market is. A lot of those roads out there are brick and very thin, so
the Brickyard.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work out, but I'm sure that they can figure it out. It's I think that area of you got the East Coast, and then you've got that northwest part. I know Portland has a track, but they're kind of starved for racing. So I'd go to that. My dad lives out there. You never been to Seattle? We'll show you around. We'll take you to the top of Space Needle. Have a good time.
I would love to go and influence people to talk about the Seattle Grand Prix. John Doonan, if that happens, you know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
Another question, speaking of the Brickyard, something that broke this weekend was that IMSA already put out their 2026 schedule, which is just absolutely crazy. But one of the things that is changing for 2026 is that Indianapolis will no longer be a 6-hour race. That's moving to Road America, Indianapolis going to a 2-hour, 40-minute format. As an Indy native, a place where you think it's a very cool town, a cool place to live. What do you think? What do you think about the loss of an endurance race here at Indy?
I don't know. I mean, I wasn't privy to, I guess, sitting out there for 6 hours. So I don't know. Maybe shortening it is better.
That's interesting. Can we?
Is there a reason? Is there a reason for IMSA? Like, do they only allow a certain amount of 6-hour races a year? Like, educate me because I don't know too much about IMSA and I'm getting into it. But at the end of the day, I think the more you can spend out at IMS, the better. I know there's a lot of other racing series that were that weekend as well, but you never like to see racing taken away from any venues. So I would say the hardcore fans, especially the ones that camp, because you and I went around and we saw a lot of people camping in the Indian at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Was that last September?
Yep.
Maybe.
And it'll be this September again, influencing.
So I think they're probably going to be disappointed it's going to be a shorter race. So I guess I would rather, as a race fan and just being out on IMS, spend the entire day watching a meaningful race. Not that the other ones aren't, but you want to see the big boys and girls run out there in the top series as long as possible. So what are your thoughts on it?
Well, so the explanation on why IMSA has a certain number of endurance races in their calendar is pretty simple. It's because of cost and runtime.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I think that most of us probably prefer, like if you're a sports car fan, you probably prefer an endurance race at any track.
Yeah.
It's a better showcase of the product that they're trying to put out there. It's more of what a sports car fan wants. But what I think is something interesting that you said, and I'd kind of like you to expand on it, is why do you think it might be a better option for Indy for it to be a shorter race? I thought that was an interesting thought process.
Well, look, I think the race fans that are privy to IndyCar and going out to the 500, they're used to probably a 3-hour race. What I like about a 6-hour race is if you buy that GA ticket, you can roam around a little bit more. You can see things. But on the flip side of that, 2 hour 45?
Yeah, 2 hour 40. It used to be 2 hour 45. They shortened it 5 minutes.
Wasn't it last year? Because I remember Doug Bowles always talking about he wanted maybe a
6 hour 42-minute
race,
which is the length of the first Indy 500.
Wasn't this race went up directly against a Colts game here in Indy?
It did. It was also originally announced that it would run into the night, and it didn't do that.
So if you're not going to run into the night, and you are going up against a Colts game, which you never know until the schedule comes out, which I think is next month. Nonetheless, maybe you just kind of look around at other things that are going on in the city, and I think they got a really good crowd of campers last year, and it's hard to tell in any road course race that happens at IMS how good or how bad the crowd is because it's just so spread out. You got people on the mounds, people in the bleachers, but maybe they shorten that just based. And I laughed because I had other obligations. I apologize. But was this a competitive race last year over the 6 hours?
It was. But I think much like most Indy road course races that are good, there was rain involved.
Yeah. Turn the sprinklers on.
It helped. We might have to do that because, that was exciting. It was Rahal Letterman landing in 1-2, and that was right after the big scandal with the FBI raid. So there was a lot of storylines with that race. I thought it was pretty compelling for what it was. But I think a lot of Wisconsinites are going to get mad at me if I don't point this out, is that I think objectively Road America is a better place to have a 6-hour race.
Yeah.
It's better for camping. It's a better road course. The views are better. There's elevation change, passing zones. You don't have to have it rain at Road America to have a compelling, exciting race.
Yeah.
The last time IMSA ran a longer distance race there was like 2012. I think it was either a 4 or 6 hour race. Ended up with a side-by-side run up the hill for the win. So I think those are the type of tracks that IMSA wants to be at. I'm glad they're not leaving Indy.
Yeah.
That was something that was brought up very briefly that I was a little bit worried that they would leave Indy entirely. It's good that they're still here. It's going to be tough to build an event, but to your point, maybe the Indianapolis racing fan will respond better to a shorter race, which is something that is hard for me to fathom, but I'm also a sports car fan, so it makes sense.
I do love Road America, though. Big fan of Road America, so I'll definitely watch that. Some Dude Bro sources that came out of Sebring for you. You and I have talked about a lot of things. And again, if you want to hop in the chat, Kyle will get that going for us on the Unverified YouTube channel. So if you're watching
exclusively
on David Land's channel, flip over to Unverified for the comments section, and Kyle will keep he'll play hall monitor on that. All right, so I think the big question that we continue to talk about when it comes to the 109th Indianapolis 500 is the entry list. We know that we are at 34. You and I talked about that 2 weeks ago. I think it officially came down right before our show went on the air, or the same day last week, that Takuma Sato is in to make a 34th entry with a Honda Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing for this year's 500. And then the question has become, is Katherine Legge going to find herself with a ride, with a chassis, with an engine, with the crew? She has a sponsor, as we know, in Elf. Where do we stand on, I guess, what we have talked about over the last 2 weeks, finding her a chassis and then possibly landing her as the 35th entry for this year's race?
So that was the one of the people that I didn't get to talk to in Sebring. I had a very long list. I got to most of them. One of the people I didn't get to was Brian Herta. We just our schedules never aligned. We were never in the same place at the same time. So for the sake of talking about this, I feel like I need to say that the last statement I got specifically from Brian Herta Autosport is no comment.
Okay.
So they're still not talking about it. I would have been nice to kind of pin Brian down and get some more details, but that just didn't happen. It's okay. It's a busy weekend for them. That being said, I've spoken to a lot of other people with knowledge of the situation,
yes.
A lot of other people, to the point where I feel very confident in reporting this as accurate. Katherine Legge, right now, to get into the Indianapolis 500, needs a chassis.
Yep.
That is the only element to this that she does not have. She has a lease from Honda secured. She has a sponsorship, ELF. You've mentioned that before a few times. Obviously, Brian Herta Autosport is willing and able to run her in the race. They have a very competent crew there and the ability to do that. They just moved into a new shop, a big shop, so there's all sorts of things that they can do to be able to put this together. The issue that they've run into is finding a modern, up-to-date DW12, which is funny because we...
Did you say modern, up-to-date, and DW12 in the same sentence?
I know. Put it in the swear jar. Isn't it funny that we're talking about this? But what the situation that they're running into right now is this. It's very difficult because Brian Herta Autosport, yes, they are affiliated somewhat with Andretti Autosport to a certain extent. But for all intents and purposes, with this entry, they are an independent team.
Yep.
And so when you're an independent team, you have a very vast mountain to climb to get into the Indianapolis 500. And you have to put all those elements together. And with the chassis, it's very difficult to talk other teams into loaning you a chassis. You think about a Ganassi or a Penske or an Andretti. If you go to them and you say, we need a car, they're going to go, well, why would we do that? We are focused on winning this race. We are the 2 or 3 top teams. Or you go to a team like Rahal or McLaren, they're maxed out. They have 4 cars each from those teams. That's just very difficult to add a fifth.
A Ganassi team that was very close to running a 4th this year.
Correct. But they didn't get that done.
Yes.
Right? And so if you're Chip at this late stage in the game, do you do that? I suppose that would be a possibility. There are a few chassis that are out there in the wild right now, or some of them that were out in the wild. And here's kind of my list.
Yep.
Brian Herta does own a chassis. It's at Andretti, and it's the pit stop car. So it's not anywhere close to being ready to go. So it would take a tremendous amount of money, more money than they would have to spend on this program to put that car together. So that car's out. There's the Jacob Abel car that was originally intended to be a car that Abel Motorsports themselves entered in IndyCar in the Indianapolis 500. They still haven't been able to put that program together themselves. Obviously, Jacob racing for Dale Coyne this year. That team got bumped last year from the Indianapolis 500, so it would not be within Abel Motorsports' best interest to put a car out there that potentially could bump Jacob. So they're not going to make that chassis available to Katherine. So then you have to my count, there's 2 other chassis that are completely up to date, up to spec. There's the Vassar Sullivan car, which was taken back from Dale Coyne Racing, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Originally, it was going to be the Toyota test car when there was the chance that Toyota was going to come into IndyCar racing. Vassar Sullivan obviously has a very good relationship with them through Lexus and IMSA. They took that car back with the intention to create their own team. Never panned out. We're not really sure what's going on or what the status of that car is right now. I know it exists, but I don't know if Vassar Sullivan still owns that. And that's, I guess, another failing of me is that I didn't get to go ask Sully or Jimmy during the IMSA weekend where that car was. Here's the status of a car I do know where it's ended up. The former Top Gun car.
Yep.
If you'll remember the 75 car in 2021, it qualified as number 50 in 2023 with R.C. Anderson. That was an Abel Motorsports entry. That car has, to the best of my knowledge, been sold to Prema, and specifically it was sold to Prema because Prema caught wind that Katherine Legge was thinking about putting this deal together, and they said, we need to go find as many of these cars that potentially are out there to buy. They bought it, and it is now with them.
What does that say to you that I believe Prema has 6 or 7 chassis now?
Depending on who you ask.
For 2 drivers in Colin Mylod, who has had speed at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, had a really good run last year in the Indianapolis 500. Robert Schwartzman, who I've been told from a lot of people has a lot of talent can get it done. I'm not going to judge them off of what happened in St. Pete, and it's going to take a full year, I think, for honest judgment to be thrown their way on what their debut was like in IndyCar. But to have 6 or 7, is that basically, hey, we are already thinking about the as everybody should, not just Prema, it should be everybody. That hey, if some, look how close Marcus Ericsson and an Andretti car was. You're one wrong turn on a Wednesday, Thursday. God forbid it's Friday, a fast Friday, and you wreck a race car, and now doesn't matter who you are, that car, that backup that you pull out just isn't as good as the primary, and you're on the outside looking in, and you go down to the wire to get yourself into the 500. I think Prema's looking at this going, we have to be also realistic with who we are, and what we have, and if they got to go into the month and say we've got 2 cars that just have to beat one other car, we have to qualify 32nd and 33rd just to get in the field. Now, obviously, their expectations are probably a little bit higher than that, but and you could say the same about a lot of other teams as well. I think Junco's probably in the same boat. Is this premise saying, look, we want the entry list to be at 34, and if we've got to buy a chassis to have an extra chassis to keep somebody else out of the field or keep somebody else off the entry list, is that the way that you took it?
Yeah, I think it's an insurance payment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and here's the other thing to think about with Prema. They don't earn any leader circle money.
Nope.
If you miss the Indianapolis 500, especially if you miss with Schwartzman, who I believe is bringing money to that could be catastrophic because you miss out on prize money and you potentially, break a contract or have to pay money back if Schwartzman doesn't make the field. That is like doomsday possibility, but it is a possibility. So I don't like it from a purity standpoint.
Yeah,
for sure. I think everybody should have a fair shake.
Dirty? Is it dirty to do that?
Well, what the chat has just reminded me as well to point out, thank you, Marco, is that Prema can be bumped from the other races as well. So they're also just taking chassis, not only for the 500.
That's a solid point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And look, if you've got the resources and the money to do it, is it like an unwritten rule in baseball that you shouldn't? That I don't know. My next question to that would be, and this is getting way into the weeds, so I apologize. We can bring it back, but we've got Grosjean sitting there, who's capable. I'm not saying he's the best driver at the 500 because he hasn't been, but you brought in Grosjean to be your reserve driver and to what I'm assuming is to help Schwartzman along. Certainly at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. What to expect out of a Honda engine, which is what Grosjean ran last year at Juncos.
Chevy.
Or excuse me, did I say Honda? Chevy was in my brain, but we've been talking too much about Honda the last couple of days. So Chevy, you put that in there, and you have, I don't think it's dirty, but I think that it's like an unwritten rule of baseball. That you probably shouldn't do that.
Tony, you've been in this game long enough. There are no unwritten rules
I know,
in racing. What are you talking about? I know. So here's, I guess...
I think it will rub people the wrong way inside the paddock.
Well, it will. Well, for sure. Yeah. Well, but I don't know. I mean, everybody rubs everybody the wrong way at some point or another.
Yes.
I guess here's the thing that you brought up to me when I kind of floated this to you earlier today when we were kind of talking off the air is, is there a possibility, as far, as difficult as this may be to fathom, that there's another Chevy engine found, because Prema's got enough cars. Do you put an engine in a car and send Roman Grosjean out there to try to qualify?
As the chat has pointed out, and I agree with this, I would trust Ryan Briscoe before I trust Roman Grosjean.
Ooh.
Well, Ryan Briscoe hasn't been in the car in...
Hey, he's still better.
8 years.
Wow,
he's better
Ryan
at the 500.
Briscoe. Man, that's a... Yeah, but that's a... Can we talk about this for a second? Because...
We're in the weeds, folks.
Another announcement came out this week that Toby Sowery has been hired as a reserve driver for Rahal.
I'm glad you brought that up.
So we're talking about reserve driver at Prema, reserve driver at Rahal Letterman.
Yuri Vips is supposedly still employed at Rahal as well.
Well, we need to put him on a milk carton because I haven't seen him in about 6 months.
Free Yuri Vips. I did see Toby Sowery down at St. Pete wearing a white Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing pullover.
You should have tweeted. You tweet everything else out, but you don't tweet that out. Are you nuts?
Sorry.
He was racing at Sebring, by the way. His car was leading LMP2 until one of the other drivers ran another GT car off the road and they got a penalty. So unfortunate for not Yuri Vips. Sorry. Now I did
Toby Sowery.
Toby Sowery. But here's the thing. is this because this is a situation that happened to Alex Lloyd about 10 or 15 years ago, where Chip Ganassi hired him, kept him in a glass case, and kind of, I don't want to say ruined his career, but really, I think, set him back.
But he gave him a 500 ride, though, didn't he?
Yeah, once a year for Sam Schmidt. Yeah. I mean, it happened a couple times. But here's the thing. What I can't seem to understand is in a series with zero testing. Yes. I think Alexander Rossi tweeted out that he was done testing for the year after running it like thermal or something. I was like, or Barber. Sorry, it was Barber. And I'm like,
I mean, outside of the April test, but yes.
That might as well be practice day 1 and 2. You know that. But it's like, what are we... Okay, why are we hiring reserve drivers? We're complaining about the cost, and we're hiring reserve drivers. What are we doing?
Is it sim time? I mean,
how is the sim really that valuable? Is a professional version of R Factor 2 really that valuable? Because that's all these teams use, by the way. Is that really?
Maybe I don't know. My question would be, if you do put Grosjean into a car, is that just a buffer to if he makes it and Schwartzman doesn't, you put Schwartzman in?
It's been done in the past.
And start 33rd.
Scott Goodyear, hello.
Ryan Hunter-Reay style.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Groff. You think Mike Groff would have passed Al Jr.? I don't know. Let's not get out of the weeds.
Probably
that
far. Not. Scott wasn't too bad on the 500 milers.
It's true. That's true. It's just he went a little too fast in 95.
Yeah.
Quick couple other Dude Bro Source things from Sebring. I just want to bring this up. One of the things that we've talked about a little bit has been McLaren and their future in racing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up is that they are indeed doing a sports prototype. I understand that that's going to be announced sooner rather than later, as late as Le Mans this year, probably a lot earlier. We expect that car at least in the World Endurance Championship, but most likely joining IMSA, if not next year, the year after, or the year after that. United Autosports would run that, and that's important because there was a rumor for a little bit of time that Arrow McLaren might have the first right of refusal to that program, and there was a little bit of worry within the industry whether or not that would mean that Arrow McLaren would go to IndyCar or leave IndyCar to go IMSA racing. So at least for now, that is not a concern.
So my question to that is so now looking back at that, United Autosports running that is pretty, that seems like the move. But do you think that the rumor that McLaren was going to go away was probably the industry and us probably being a little bit insecure? Because I would say McLaren recently has probably been one of our most important pieces of the IndyCar puzzle for the last couple of years within the fan base and the paddock.
Well, I think if McLaren did, and I made that video, and I actually had someone from McLaren come up to me at a Meijer, believe it or not, and said, you don't actually think we're leaving, right? And I said, well, that wasn't the point of the video. The point of the video was to kind of explain what a kind of tremendous detriment it would be if McLaren did leave. And to your point, Kyle, 100%. If they did leave, it would be, I think that is an insecurity of ours. I think it's an insecurity of ours when we talk about Honda. Honda and McLaren, you're talking about two of the biggest stakeholders, two of the biggest supporters of IndyCar, two of the biggest promoters of IndyCar.
100%.
So, of course, we're worried if they're going to leave or not. Whether or not it's actually true, if it comes up or somebody credible, because I think Jenna Fryer wrote an article where it kind of hinted, the program might be under. So, okay, are we just supposed to ignore that and treat it like it's not happening? I think we have to treat it as a serious issue. But at the end of the day, I think you're right, Kyle. I think we do have some insecurities as people who are in the IndyCar industry, but I think it's justified.
Well, and nobody wants to see anybody leave, especially a partner like Honda, as you mentioned, and what they do for the sport and the sponsorships and the money that they put into IndyCar. And it's never going to be a good look. There'll be so many people out there that say, this is why, and well, if you would have done this, and if you would have brought a new car and had, maybe another engine manufacturer come in, maybe that would have saved them. You could have done more. So it's not going to be a good look. One thing I did want to wrap up with the Prema Katherine Legge thing. For me, if Katherine Legge is going to be in a car for the Indianapolis 500, it's going to somebody of stature, I guess would be the term. Somebody high up at IMS is going to have to say, "Hey, we need to get this done. We have a big promotion in women in motorsports. We have a big promotion with Elf, who's a sponsor of IMS. We have a huge activation inside the Midway, and we need Katherine Legge to be on that entry list to promote this, push it forward." Because we talk about good and bad looks, it's probably not the best of look if you have that sponsorship. Now, maybe there's other ways you could utilize her in the month of May inside of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway that we can get into another time. But I think this is going to happen. Somebody of high up status at IMS at Penske Entertainment is going to have to say we need to get this done for our sponsor.
Well, that was something that came up this weekend, was the idea that you could maybe do that activation without a car in the race.
Yeah.
And to that I said, that would have been fine last year if Katherine had not been on the entry list in an ELF car.
Yeah.
But now that you've had her out there in the car with the sponsorship, with that big part of the activation, it's going to be really difficult to sell that, to go, we've got the same activation this year, but we don't have a driver.
Because, that's the question that you're going to get from everybody. Well, wait a minute. What's going on here? What are these hero cards are from last year? Oh, I brought my daughter to the racetrack for the first time, and we walked into this activation, and it was super cool. Oh, but she can't watch the race next week and cheer for this driver that she just got a hat of or a shirt of or a signed hero card of. So, it would be... It's kind of like when you go to like a NASCAR race and you see that show car, and you and I and Kyle know that show car is probably from 15, 20 years ago, and then somebody says, oh, is that the actual car they run? No, but it's very similar. It's like, oh, no, she ran in the 500 last year, but she's not doing it this year. It's awkward. And it's probably a bad look, I think, more than anything.
No, sorry, kid. That show car's a March '85 G. That hasn't been running in 30 years.
That thing ran the IRL race at Chicagoland in 01.
Yeah, no, I'm the type of person. So here's what I do when I see a show car: is first of all I go, is this real or is it like wooden sheet metal? And then I start going, what's the chassis number?
Yeah.
And then I start texting them, hey, you worked for this team, right?
Yeah.
What chassis number was this?
That's like when they had the Super Bowl cars, all the IndyCar cars, and one was a Panther car because underneath the wrap, it was a Lions car. I'll never forget it. You could see Dan Weldon's name on it.
Oh.
So it was like a Panther. It was like I think it was a National Guard Panther car that they had just wrapped with the Detroit Lions. All right, our favorite thing to talk about.
Thermal?
Well, I was going to say TV ratings, but
we'll
get to thermal.
It, I think.
So NASCAR, pretty big number, not as big as what they had at COTA.
It's also an FS1 race.
FS1 race. Josh Berry, first-time winner. I think, somebody asked me, that's pretty cool. I said, yeah, it's first-time winner. Wood Brothers has been around the sport. Everything I've ever heard about the Wood Brothers has been they're the nicest people in the world. Formula One on Saturday night with a pretty big number at midnight on ESPN?
1.1 million at midnight, which is Well,
everybody, including myself, was out drinking for St. Patrick's Day.
I was watching it.
I'm sure it was all on at a lot of bars that just happened to be on. I would be interested to see what an IndyCar rating would be if it was at like midnight and just all the bars in the world that just have TVs running, what that would do for the rating.
Okay, well, if that was happening for IndyCar, then your rating is still mostly within 465 if they were played at the bars. But
no, that's not true.
That's
if
true.
It was on FS1, and let's say they're running like Australia, and it was midnight here, it would be on at so many bars just because the bar just turns on FS1 because there's a college basketball game on, and then it just stays on the rest of the night.
Kyle,
I think it's around the country, not just 465.
Kyle, you haven't lived here long enough, brother. They don't play any racing in the bars around here.
Yeah.
That's a real problem, by the way.
Yeah,
that's
crap.
a real problem.
That's crap. I've literally been in bars at midnight, and I've seen Alex Palou on the news.
Kyle, I had to tell the Chili's to put the NASCAR race on.
That's Chili's.
They had a car in the race. And I had to tell them, hey, Chili's, you guys have a car in this race. Do you want to maybe put it on? I don't know. I want to go back to Josh Berry real quick.
Yeah.
Super
cool story.
I saw a stat that said this is the first time the Wood Brothers have won in back-to-back seasons since 1989.
Who did they win with last year?
They won with Harrison Burton.
And it was the first timer, right?
First time winner.
Trevor Baines won a first-time race
but
with
never
them.
in 2 consecutive years since 1989, which is hard to believe because they've been around for so long.
Kyle Petty and...
It would have been Morgan Shepherd.
Yeah. And then Christopher Bell was going for 4 straight. It's only happened a handful of times. The last time was 2007 with Jimmy Johnson. Something very hard to do. We don't see it that often, as I just mentioned, but good for Josh Berry. And I think people should stick tight to your David Land on YouTube channel over the next couple of days.
Yeah. I can't say specifics, but I can say this: going up to Detroit tomorrow. And there's something Thursday morning that's happening that I think is going to be really cool. And those of you who complain that I don't do enough NASCAR, it's NASCAR related. That's all I can say.
It's related to the first-time winner that we just discussed, and we'll go from there. It'll be a lot of fun. So stick tight to David Land's YouTube channel on that. All right, let's go to Thermal. Second race of the season. Shameless plug. Tony D podcast tomorrow. We'll have Nolan Siegel on. Him and I had a great discussion earlier today about him heading back really to the first track that he had his first IndyCar weekend at a year ago. Alex Palou is your 2-1 odds-on favorite.
You almost be losing money betting on
which
him.
Is crazy. Thermal practice begins, I believe, 5 o'clock Eastern time on Friday.
Hey, can I say something?
Yeah.
I'm going to be on IndyCar Radio for that, so you should definitely check that out. It's live and free, baby.
Hit mute on the TV and listen to you. I think you could pull it up via IndyCar's app.
Yep. Yes, you can.
There you go.
Yeah. David Land will be on the IndyCar app.
I think our boy Jason Van Sickle will be there, too.
JVS talking about the new museum. It's going to be great.
So before we talk about the, I guess, X's and O's of what of Thermal racing wise, there is this. I've read some blogs and whatever you want to call them. There is like a pretentious, like, people aren't liking Thermal for what it is, for it being the private club. You and I were there last year. I enjoyed it outside of Palm Springs. It's like if you live at a golf course, instead of living at a golf course, you just have $1 million homes around a racetrack. It's an odd racetrack. There is some sweeping turns. We didn't see too many incidents last year. Obviously, that first lap incident, Marcus Ericsson in practice had a big hit on Saturday. But do you think fans are excited to watch Thermal this weekend? Last year was kind of, I would say, a dud. I don't know if it was the $1 Million Challenge. I don't know if it was an all-star race. Whatever the heck they ended up calling it or telling us not to call it. By the way, you're going up against the NCAA tournament on Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock.
You mentioned basketball. How'd you get the Thermal last year, by the way?
I won. You want me to tell a story?
Absolutely. If you didn't tell this story, Tony, we need to preserve this. Let me tell you something. Kyle and I, we went on a four week racing coverage thing. It was like go-karts. It was like St. Pete. It was Sebring, and then it was Thermal.
We basically just stayed in Florida for 4 weeks. Well, 3 weeks, and then we came back to Indianapolis and went to Thermal. That was our stint. It was insane.
And I was pretty. I'll be honest. I was pretty burned out by the end of it. I was just like, do I really want to go? Look, we'll talk about Thermal here in a second, but it is a fun place to be. But even at that point, I was a little bit beat down. I was like, man, do I really want to go to this? And I was getting sick from Sebring, and it was a whole thing. But then, it was one of those things where we heard Tony kind of mention to us. He was like, yeah, I'm gonna go win this. I'm gonna go to this Papa Shot contest. If I win the Papa Shot contest, I'm gonna be able to.
It was like a week before Thermal, and it's like Tony, doing our usual thing. Tony, you're gonna go to Thermal, and he's like, yeah, I'm trying to win this Papa Shot contest, and if I win this, they're gonna send me to California to see the Pacers play, and then if I'm out there anyways, I'm just gonna go to Thermal. And David and I are like, of course you are.
He's gonna win this Papa Shot contest, and it was crazy because then Kyle, I was
which is just mini basketball. I know sometimes when I say Papa Shot, people don't realize what that is.
Yeah, it's
just like mini arcade basketball.
Yeah. So Kyle, I'm just sitting and my nose is running, I'm sneezing, I'm having a bad time. I was getting sick. But then Kyle just looks at his phone and goes, David, Tony won the Papa Shot contest. so Tony, and we weren't surprised.
Yeah, the best part is we were for a second we were laughing about it, but then we were we're not even surprised.
Of course that happened.
Of course this happened.
So Tony, tell us the story. Tell us from your perspective, because we're sitting in Palm Springs, California, just having the best grand old time, and you're at the Pacers game, and then you're suddenly flying to Palm Springs. Tell us about that.
Well, I want to talk about the whole weekend too, because we had a really good dinner that Saturday night when we watched Formula One. All right, so basketball and racing are my two loves. I was really good at basketball growing up, played it, and I've won some Papa Shot contests before, and this one was through the Pacers, and you had to go on the court to compete. They narrowed it down when we got there to 4 people, and they narrowed it down to 2. So at the end of the first quarter, you go out there and it's on the big screen. I'll probably tweet it out again just because it's a funny video. And there was a couple drivers, I think Marcus and David Malukas were there. And I wasn't going to go to Thermal. It's an expensive ticket to get out there. Let's just be honest here. And the grand prize for this Papa Shot contest was an all-expenses-paid trip to go to L.A. to see the Pacers play the Lakers on a Sunday night and the Clippers on Monday night. Well, it just so happened to be Palm Springs IndyCar Thermal weekend as well. So I'm like, all right. And shout out to Tom Blatler, who does some PR out of Thermal. I told him and I had dinner in Vegas 2 weeks prior where he lives. And I said, he goes, are you coming to Thermal? And I said, well, what do you want me to do? Because I want to apply, but the only way I'm going is if I win this Papa Shot contest. So I go on the court, win the Papa Shot contest, ended up getting a rental car out of it, paid for my flight. They let me book my own flight, so I got to go straight to Palm Springs. Got you guys at the airport. End up running into Todd, who runs the Agua Caliente Casino out there in Palm Springs. He says, what are you guys doing tonight? And I said, probably watch the NCAA tournament. He goes, well, come on by for some dinner. So we ended up having a nice dinner inside of the sports book there. The roulette table was nice to me. It was just one of those.
I forgot about that part.
Yeah, it was just one of those.
I've never forgotten that part.
You know, David sometimes refers to me as the main character, and it was just one of those main character type weekends where like it just all went together, and I had a great time. And you know, people say like once in a lifetime. You know, that probably is a once in a lifetime thing. So that's how I got the Thermal last year. Not going this year. There wasn't the same. I think the grand prize this year was in Chicago for that Papa Shot, so it wasn't quite as cool. But yeah, so that was that, and then I think I owe you guys a 12-pack of Crush Pop because I wanted.
That happened too.
This week. So over the weekend, So Eric Smith from IndyCar.com, shout out to him. We were hanging out at the Big Ten tournament, and his son hit a 3 to win a year's supply of Crush Soda, which is the official sponsor of the Big Ten tournament. So I said, what the hell? I want to try to hit a 3. If you've ever been to Gainbridge Fieldhouse, there's a little outdoor court, and you know, you go up there and you get one shot only, and if you bury it, they give you a stack of coops for free Crush Soda for a year, and I knocked it down, nothing but the bottom of the net, and it went through. And so I think next week we'll crack open a few cans of Crush Soda, and if they want to sponsor us, hit us up. But we'll get some Crush Soda out there, and yeah, no, it was great. It was fun. I mean, you know, I guess my secret hidden talent is being good at Papa Shot and hitting threes. I don't know.
I had a good weekend.
So
that's crazy.
I mean, you know, hey, it's one of those things where I don't know if it's luck, I don't know if it's skill. What is it? Preparation is when luck and skill meet. So, yeah, no Thermal for me, but.
Just start selling soda. We're gonna set up a stand.
Yeah,
it's gonna be a lemonade stand. We're gonna.
Hell, the drive over here, I passed like 9 of those stands. That there's no way that
we're gonna beat them. We're gonna beat them.
But anyway, so Thermal, I think
down Crush Soda.
I mean, we'll crack some open next week. It'll be a good time. Alex Palou is your 2-1 favorite. I mean, he seems to be hooked up. He was really good at down at St. Pete. Things have taken off, and I think Ganassi has elevated Meyer-Shank a bit. I think Meyer-Shank has elevated Ganassi a little bit. They qualified really well there. Marcus Armstrong and Nolan Siegel are like my 2 dark horses coming up for this weekend's race. But Thermal, your expectations for that green flag on Sunday at 3 o'clock?
Oh, boy. Well, we've got a lot to break down here because I guess we'll talk about the race first, and then we'll kind of go back into the discussion about the fan reaction to Thermal. But I think we're really expecting a strategy race. This was a race that was very, very tough on tires last year. Yeah. So I think you might get some randomness to it, which would be kind of nice.
Let's hope.
To your point about Alex Palou, I think for sure that pipe flows both ways, potentially flows a little bit further up the Ganassi pipe than I think we originally thought it would. Mm-hmm. But if you think back to St. Pete and Thermal, those were places, to your point, that Felix Rosenquist was very, very fast last year. And we saw it at St. Pete. Palou was very, very quick. Scott Dixon was very, very quick. We kind of forget that he did that whole thing without a radio. Mm-hmm. And you think about Ganassi at Thermal last year when Marcus Armstrong was driving for the Ganassi, I guess we'll call it factory team. It was a 1-2 in the $1 Million Challenge with Palou winning from Armstrong. Armstrong's a driver that I think is going to have a good day, although I think he threw a good day away at St. Pete by getting into the wall. So he's got to get those mistakes taken care of. But this is a race that he's going to have some confidence in. I mean, I don't think the betting odds are wrong to have it 2-1 with Palou. This is a track that Alex won at. This is a track that I think he can win again. I think the only thing we're really going to be looking for, and I hate to say this because I apologize, I'm not influencing very well, but because I'm not selling it, it's going to come down to strategy.
Yeah.
This is a total strategy race because not only is it a tight track, it's going to be a track that's very difficult to pass on.
Yeah.
And we saw at St. Pete, this is a fairly short track, right? Or at least a track that I think is going to lend itself to lap traffic with 27 cars out there. And that's going to be a real big issue with the dirty air that we've seen. This track's going to be dirty air central. There's not really a lot of passing zones. There's 2 real long straightaways, and the rest of it's twisty bits. So you're going to have to overcome that. You're going to have to time your strategy right. And if you can get your tires and your fuel all sorted out and then you can keep it on the road, maybe you have a chance to beat Alex Palou. But, and I'll say this, Tony, and this is another point that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about right now. Think about the tracks that IndyCar has tested at recently. There's more recent test miles at Thermal than any other racetrack. The drivers who really are going to be at a disadvantage are the drivers who, A, weren't here last year, and B, are the rookies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think restarts, if we have any, obviously we didn't in St. Pete outside of that first one of that first yellow. Starts and restarts, we saw Grosjean and Renus, I think, have a problem last year in one of the starts of the All-Star race or whatever it was. So I think that's going to be key. I think if there is a late race yellow, which I think we all probably hope that there was going to be, that it would bring some excitement and some people going for maybe different strategies. Real quick, you mentioned the Scott Dixon thing. I did kind of get to the bottom of that with his radio because there were some questions on how that went down. There was a piece of his radio that wasn't quite fully plugged in. So there was radio communication. There was a little bit of back and forth. It was mostly Scott could talk back, but they couldn't talk back to him. So they tried to make some adjustments. And somebody had asked, well, wait a minute. If they weren't going to run Robert Schwartzman because he was having radio issues, why did they allow it with Scott Dixon? IndyCar did know about it. And, I mean, look, it's a rookie versus the GOAT, or the current GOAT, so maybe that had something to do with it.
So they just trusted Scott Dixon. They said, Scott Dixon can run without a spotter. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so, and really, I mean, and trust me, I'm never going to knock a spotter at all. I do that way on a less level, but the spotters are really there for heading into turn 1 and coming out of the pit exit because St. Pete is one of the crazier pit exits on the circuit. But, that was a good run, and Scott had a chance to win, I think, if he would have probably had that proper radio communication. As for what Thermal has this weekend, I mean, I guess you could say this in every road and street course and really every race, but certainly I think this weekend qualifying is going to be absolutely essential.
It's like Monaco.
Yeah. I think it'll be essential this weekend. You want to start in those first 3 rows. You probably want to start in the first 2 rows and even on the front row to make sure that you have yourself a chance. So I think maybe the strategy and the boldness of the weekend is really going to come to play on Saturday during qualifying.
Well, that'll be when you see the guys really hanging out the most.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where you're going to see the crashes too.
Yeah.
Is you're going to see guys really, really pushing.
And the crashes here aren't going to be. It's not going to be a spin-off. I mean, there's some. We're going to see some hard contact.
You're going to yard sale a car,
yes,
because it's and this is it is a track that is not necessarily designed for these cars.
Yeah,
I think that's the fairest way I can put it. So, qualifying is going to be pretty sketchy. But the race, I think, is going to be pretty calm. Yeah. And I say this, and I'm going to probably we're going to have what was that Laguna Seca race where they just all turned their brains off the entire race a couple years ago? Probably just have that, and I'll look stupid by saying that. But I think, logically, you're going to, because remember every single one of those heat races last year, the pole sitter got a jump and just was gone.
Yeah.
So whoever's on the pole is going to be able to really control the race, I think. The question is going to be, how much can you save in the back, whether that's fuel or tires, whichever lasts the longest, and how do you strategize that race and try to leapfrog as many positions as you can to get in clean air at the right time? You could dumpster dive. That's the other thing I think is going to be really important is, are there going to be guys early on in the race who pit early to try to get clean air, to try to be able to just essentially have the advantage of being a leader, but you're running like 27th. And once the pit stop sequence. So I think there's a lot of things that will be, if you like the strategy element of racing, you're going to like this. If you like wheel-to-wheel competition, you ain't going to like this. And that's just going to be how it is. I do want to say this real quick, Tony, because we kind of talked about some of the negativity about Thermal, and we've kind of brought it up a few times. So I understand because it's always been a PR problem with Thermal. I've been there twice. I got to go there for Stephen Wilson's announcement at the end of 2022 for the Indy 500, and then I also, of course, got to go to the race last year. And here, I will say this. I think that everyone, all the members at Thermal, Tim and Twana Rogers who run it, members like Don Cusick who are very forward-facing, I think they really do mean well. I think they really do want an IndyCar race that is a crown jewel, something that is beloved by everybody. Now, have they taken all of the right steps to do that? I think they've made a few missteps, particularly in the PR department, and I think they need to. There's still room to grow. For sure. I don't think it's totally I'm not one of those people who sits there and goes, "Oh, Thermal doesn't have a place in the IndyCar calendar." I think you have to give everyone a chance who's willing to put up that kind of investment, because they've put up a tremendous amount of money to put the races and the tests on that they've done there.
It's good to race at places that you're wanted at too.
Yeah, and I think there's a point to that. And so, there was a point in time where I worried that this might be the business model that kind of takes over IndyCar. I'm kind of glad it hasn't. But I think I don't know. I don't know if I really loved the All-Star race or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, that gimmick format really didn't work out. So I personally am a little bit more excited. This is actually a point race. I know you're going to say, "Oh,
I don't know if I like."
Wait a minute, didn't I get ripped? Didn't I get ripped apart about wanting All-Star race at IndyCar? Now you're saying that you want Thermal to be an IndyCar All-Star?
That is crazy.
Well, I don't know if you would do an All-Star race. A preseason exhibition of some kind. I mean, I don't know if I.
What's the difference between an All-Star race and a preseason exhibition? I think All-Star race sounds a hell of a lot better.
Well, how would you format an All-Star race though? I mean, because that's the thing. You've got 27 cars, right? It's not like you've got. The NASCAR makes sense because you've got 40, and like back in the day when it was really a cool All-Star race, or like the Busch Clash, there was like a reason that you qualified for that race. So how would you do it?
But at least if somebody wrecks this weekend, and was it Grosjean that was asking who's going to pay for the crash damage because they didn't make any money? At least this year, when a car wrecks or you lose out or somebody gets in and your day's over, at least it's a points-paying race. And I mean, what do you want this weekend to just be an exhibition?
I don't know.
It's hard. I think points race or nothing. I don't need so if you're going to do a preseason exhibition, you're going to move this to December?
I'd put it in February.
I actually agree with Tony here.
Well, that's fine. Just explain.
Because I think it just feels correct that it's a point race.
Yeah.
I think it's last year we learned, I think, that it was very meaningless. Because my takeaway from last year's Thermal event was if you, like you said, they want something that's a crown jewel, that's different. My takeaway being there was that was an event where, as a fan, the ticket price was steep, but you would walk away from that being okay, my food was free. I got to go through the pits, be the closest I could have, and the track's cool.
Yeah,
the sights of the cars, going through that S's section with the mountains, it's very picturesque, it's very cool. And in the future, they could probably add some places for fans to watch from cooler locations for that same ticket price. But also if you go a few years and you tell people hey, it's not you just have more and more people coming back saying that event was actually cool to attend as a fan. If you want the best IndyCar experience, go to Thermal. Then I think it would work. But I just think going there, it made the race sucked. Not being points.
Yeah. Everybody was saving tires, and you wanted to save those tires to advance. And to Kyle's point, outside of getting met by somebody strapped in an assault rifle to get in, it was fun. I had a blast. I literally walked up to the wall at Pit Road. I'll send some of the pictures out. And literally, I mean, if Joseph Newgarden would have put his hand out like this, I could have high-fived. I mean, you were right there.
You're so close.
You got to walk through the paddock. Nobody said a word.
It's adult Disney World.
It was.
Sure,
everybody was welcoming. They had local food trucks that had coffee, ice cream, food. They had a beer garden set up right there that you can just grab a beer, and nobody said a word. You were all good. And as Kyle mentioned, absolutely picturesque. If you're cold and crappy here at Indy, although it was very nice today, you should go to Palm Springs. It's a beautiful area. The weather's, I think, a little bit colder this weekend than what it was last year.
That'll be good for tires.
Yeah, we got up. Remember, we watched one of the starts up on top of one of the buildings. I mean, if you're going to go and it's in your realm of going, don't feel like you're not going to be welcome because, you're wearing – I mean, I was wearing pants from Walmart. You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Go there, drink some beer. If you can afford it, you'll fit in. They'll love to have you. I know it's probably too late now because it's Tuesday, but if you think about it for next year.
It's like the greatest vacation you can make.
Yeah, and the people that live out there, and we see what Don Cusick does for the sport, not only to grow his car and his team, but – thermal as well, and welcoming all. I mean, I've seen it on the Facebook page what he's been able to do. It's those people they're racing fans. They'll talk racing. Hell, I even talked racing a little bit with Caitlyn Jenner and asked if we should get her a microphone, just like old time's sake. I didn't see John Elway, however, but it was. I liked it out there. I'm a little disappointed I'm not going this year, but the flights are just a little bit too pricey.
Well, that's the thing that's something that Don Cusick has always specifically said to me, because I've always said, how can I help, right? Yeah. And I hate to say it that way, but like as someone who does care about IndyCar, and I see that they care about IndyCar, I say, how can I explain this place to someone who hasn't been to it?
Yeah.
And Don would always say, look, we're a bunch of normal people.
Yeah.
Yes, we're wealthy, like 100%. Yeah. But at the end of the day, to your point, and to Kyle's point too, you go there, and I thought the $500 price point last year, that was a blanket ticket. I know they've kind of complicated it now, and now there's different tiers, and I think that was a mistake. But I thought the $500 blanket ticket where you got in and you got a true IndyCar VIP experience, I thought there was room to grow there. And again,
it was like no security. Like you could go wherever you wanted.
It was crazy, and it was crazy in a good way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too about the Thermal Club members. I think they should be commended for letting a bunch of yahoos into their club.
Like the three of us.
Right, 100%. And they have all been so welcoming. Like, I've not had a single bad experience at Thermal. I don't think that's the issue. But the problem is, Tony, and the problem is, Kyle, it's so difficult. Because we did a feature last year. We went around with Don Cusick on a golf cart.
Yep.
And I was just like, Don, let's talk to members.
Yeah.
Let's get them out in front of cameras. Let's see the kind of fun that they're having there.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to take that to someone who hasn't been to the Thermal Club, and there is such a high cost of entry to get to the Thermal Club, to your point, that I think a typical IndyCar fan would go, if I'm spending that kind of money, I'm going to go to Long Beach.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm going to go to Portland. Or I'm going to go to the Indianapolis 500. I'm going to buy a sweet ticket or a really good high-up ticket. Right? Like, that's where there's a little bit of trouble explaining that sort of thing. So I really do think the big criticism I would have of Thermal is not so much what it is or what the track is, or like we can talk about the racing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But from them specifically, it's just working on the messaging. For them, that's all they need to do. And then IndyCar needs to do that the job on the on-track product. But messaging is the biggest thing that they need to work on.
Yeah, I mean, we all felt welcome there. We all had a good time. There was people that I think that I knew that came from Indy that aren't rich, if you want to put it that way, and still went out there and had a good time. So I think I've solved the problem. So let's meet you in the middle about an all-star race. Let's do the road course at IMS and turn the sprinklers on the backstretch and make that the road course.
Only on the backstretch? So like halfway?
Well, I mean, no. Put the sprinklers on wherever they could touch the racing surface.
I just don't like. I have the IMSA attitude. Less Indy road course. Less Indy road course.
It'd be less laps if it was an all-star race, I bet.
Oh, you mean like in May? So take away the GP and make it an all-star race.
Yeah, you said you wanted an all-star race.
I didn't say I wanted an all-star race.
You said you would rather. Okay, so what you're saying was you'd rather have the thermal race as an exhibition.
I thought that the thermal race would have been better if you would have done like I didn't hate the preseason test idea.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be. I don't think it needs to be, but I think it would have been a little bit better if it had been preseason test. Bring all the media out there. Let's have the media day there when there's actually cars on track. Let's all talk about it. XYZ. Actually be able to talk about something with the drivers other than what did you eat for Christmas, right? And then I think you could do some sort of a made-for-TV event, whether we call it an all-star race, whatever, an exhibition, even if it's a points race and it's the first race of the season. You do something like that, and then you have it the week before the Daytona 500. I really think you need a race before the Daytona 500. I'm going to keep beating that drum, and I guess that turns into the Super Bowl week like next year, so I guess we can't do that now. But after the Daytona 500, the week after, let's fill the front end of the schedule out. And I hope.
Do you say that because fans are just so starved for racing in general at that point?
Well, we're starved for IndyCar.
Definitely starved for IndyCar at the 6-month non-racing season.
And if you're going to have a non-racing season, and your TV partner insists on you having that long of a non-racing season, at least utilize the time that they're giving you. I know we're getting Arlington next year.
Yeah.
And I guess we hope that they announced the date. It's not a clash with Thermal. It would be potentially the week after Thermal if Thermal stays on the calendar.
Logistically makes sense.
Sure. So, okay, we've got another race kind of in this part of the calendar. I'm still not seeing anything to fill the 3-week gap between St. Pete and Thermal.
Yeah.
And we, again, hope that Thermal stays on the calendar in that case. Otherwise, you're back to a 3 or 4 week gap.
Well, I thought this past weekend IndyCar should have been racing. You had, it was less of a busy weekend. There was games, but less of a busy weekend from the NCAA standpoint.
Sebring.
I mean, okay, so
half of the industry was down there. It felt like it was in an IndyCar race.
They should have been racing this past weekend.
No, you can't. I mean, I
Sebring's on that weekend every year.
Well, no, they moved it. So now it's the week after Arlington for next year.
Okay.
So there's no clash. So you're getting your wish. They are racing on the next weekend. They're racing in Arlington.
That's what I mean. If Formula One, NASCAR are racing, there was a buzz for Formula One season to start. Mm-hmm. So next year, I guess that'll work out perfectly. With that being said, hopefully it doesn't take away any other races on the schedule, which we can get into at another time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, we can sit here and bitch and complain about the scheduling all we want. I had a nice Kyle Larson auto on Parkside over the weekend.
I was wondering when you were going to talk about that.
Yeah, no, I got a little bit lucky, so I don't know if you saw the Parkside cards. I'll just say this, because if they want to sponsor, give us a call. I had a Kyle Larson one. Let me ask you guys both this. I know we got to wrap up here. We're a little bit over. Does anybody beat Alex Palou this weekend?
It would be cool if there was like a new winner, like a Marcus Armstrong or somebody, mm-hmm. Or even a Felix Rosenquist. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. See, boy, the Shank guys got to start winning and quick. Otherwise, they're going to make me look stupid. How about Christian Lundgaard?
Yeah.
How about Christian Lundgaard? There we go. There's maybe a fun winner. What do you think, Kyle? Fun winner.
McLaughlin. McLaughlin wins.
That's not a fun winner.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Scott.
Grant.
I don't know. No, you can't say that. You can't say that. I heard what you were about to say.
I was getting you there.
Are we going to get to a point where we are tired of Alex Palou winning all the time?
Yes.
For sure.
Are we there yet? I'm not quite there yet. But I think, we talk about how competitive this sport is at IndyCar and the competition level. Yet it's kind of like the same.
Survey said that was a lie.
Yeah. But kind of the 3 or 4 same drivers we keep talking about. Sometimes 5. I mean, I know you're at 4 guys can win the 500. I was at about 7 or 8.
5.
5.
I said 5, and I'll write a list. There'll be a quiz later. Don't you worry.
I wish we could talk about that list we made last night. We'll have to talk about that sometime.
Yeah, we'll
that'd be
when we actually have nothing to talk about. When another gap in the schedule happens, we'll talk about that.
Kyle, before we wrap up, anybody in the chat we need to get to?
Yeah, I do want to get to some chat questions.
All right.
There were a few that I didn't point out earlier because I just wanted to wait for us to get to a point of it being relevant. You were talking about the schedule. Mm-hmm. Let me find so there was a question earlier on the fact that we always complain about how the IndyCar schedule is so spread apart.
Yeah.
But the IMSA schedule is, and nobody seems to complain about that side of it. So maybe explain why it's an issue for IndyCar to have a spread out schedule and not for IMSA.
I think from my standpoint, IMSA's, maybe because IMSA's races are longer, you get more of that on-track competitive product. Mm-hmm. IndyCar weekends go by very fast.
Yep.
It's like practice, qualify, morning warm-up. If you're on a road or street course, go race. IMSA, you're getting a crap ton of hours, not just laps. You're getting hours of competition, meaningful competition. Yeah. Do we need an IndyCar endurance race?
Well, that used to be the Indianapolis 500. I don't know if we really consider that an endurance race anymore. But to your point about IMSA, yes, there are gaps, mm-hmm. but the season starts in January and ends in October. So you are spreading. Because, I mean, like, the thing with IndyCar is, like, I think you've got – the problem is it's like lethargic, and then it drinks a Red Bull, and then it crashes.
Yeah.
Right? I think if the schedule was a little bit more well thought out, I think it would feel less short. But, we're going to get into the summertime, June, July, August, and they're going to be racing every single week, and it's going to be like, oh, my God. And then we're going to be sitting there in October, November, and going, it feels like IndyCar has been gone for like 5 months already.
Yeah.
I think you could solve that if you just spread the race. And it's tough because most of them are in the Midwest, right? And I'm always a guy who advocates for more Midwest races like Michigan and Cleveland, so I'm part of the problem for sure. But, if you look at IndyCar, they're looking at races at they're obviously already announced Arlington, warmer climate. Denver, not necessarily a warmer climate, but at least on the West Coast, so maybe you could get away with going a little early there. Mexico City comes up a lot. I suppose we'll talk about that at some point. I think there's very, very real possibilities that that's going to get done very soon. So I think there's some – you could fill in the front half of the schedule a little bit more. It's just tough. It's just so tough.
Yeah, because this is a very lackluster, very start, go. And I mean, you talk about drivers, when you talk to them, and I always ask, are you a momentum? And I asked Nolan Siegel on my podcast, I said, are you momentum, like get that team camaraderie, keep going, especially when you get wrecked or get taken out on lap one. And he's like, yeah, I wish we had more races right around this time, because it's like everybody ramps up to start, and then you start, and then it's like, oh, we got to take 20 days off before we go green again, which is pretty much 3 weeks. And then it's like, okay, now we're going to start it here, and then we got to wait a couple more weeks. And then it's like, oh, then we got to wait almost a full month between Long Beach and Barber?
It's like crazy. At least
you have the Indy 500 test, I understand, but
which helps. But
yeah, we can complain about this until the crows come home.
What else does the chat want to know, Kyle?
Stymie Snurdly wanted to know, who are your high-risk, high-reward guys for this weekend? He said Herta for sure, Santino too, and that should be interesting. So, yeah, like you guys were saying earlier, there's a lot of guys who had a bad St. Pete.
Yeah.
What do you expect them to go? Like David said, I think the term dumpster diving was interesting.
Yeah.
I look at, as I mentioned, and you and I talked about this on the start of the show when we previewed IndyCar drivers this year. This is why I had Nolan Siegel on my podcast, was to ask him, like, this is the first time you're going back to a track that you have an IndyCar experience on. Him and I talked about his relationship with TK, how that came about. You got knocked out at St. Pete, and this is like, hey, do you belong? Can you prove that you belong? And I think that needs to start this weekend. I would look for a guy, like maybe just Ed Carpenter Racing in general. Can they continue to take that next step? Can Christian Rasmussen get a top 10? Can Alex Rossi take the 10th that he got at St. Pete and elevate that to the next level? So I would be looking at Ed Carpenter Racing coming up this weekend to have good results.
I agree, and I think you think about a strategy race, you think about dumpster diving. What did Alexander Rossi do at St. Pete? Yep. Took a risky strategy and it paid off. So I would agree, Alexander Rossi.
Yeah, Matt Barnes is one of the best engineers that seems like not a lot of people know about inside the paddock, but he's been on that 21 car for a very long time. So I think we would agree there. Then ECR is a team to watch for coming up at Thermal. Kyle, continue.
Did you guys actually get to catch, so we know Tony said you were at a bar. David, did you catch, did you guys watch the F1 race?
Yeah, I actually watched the F1 race, yeah.
Yeah, we did have some people asking for your guys' thoughts on the race itself.
It's kind of, the thing about Formula One is you always have a dominant team, dominant driver. That's what we have now with Lando Norris. Obviously, McLaren has clearly taken the next step. They won the Constructors' Championship last year. I thought it was a more interesting race than it had any right to be. I personally think Melbourne kind of sucks as a track.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but it does. But the rain definitely helped. The rookies really struggled. I think that was really a story, except for Kimi Antonelli, who, of course, we know Kimi Antonelli's actually good. So, wow, surprise, he's actually good. Ferrari had a terrible race. What a terrible debut, unfortunately, for Lewis Hamilton through no fault of his own at Ferrari. And kind of the meme continues with that. It was a bad strategy call. Wow, where have I heard that one before with Ferrari? So I think that it'll be interesting to see if Red Bull can kind of get Max Verstappen the help that he needs. Clearly, at least to begin with, Liam Lawson is right about where Sergio Perez was last year. So maybe they should have moved Yuki Tsunoda up to that team. But yeah, I think that we're going to have to see as the season progresses whether or not McLaren can kind of hang on to that top position as the top constructor and Lando Norris is the top driver. We would like to see, I think, Ferrari get up there and race with them. We'd like to see Mercedes get up there and race with them. I don't know if many people want to see Max Verstappen compete again, but I think at least from a pure racer standpoint, I want to see the best race possible. And we didn't quite have that in Australia, but at least the rain kind of gave us some crazy moments, like the McLarens both running off the track and into the gravel trap, and at least gave us some question mark of what might or might not happen.
If you want to interact with us again every Tuesday, 8 o'clock here on the Unverified YouTube channel inside of the Fatheads Eyewear Studio. Kyle, we got time for one more comment via the Unverified YouTube page.
Well...
Is that about it?
That was about it.
Oh, there we go.
I would say I think we're good to shout out the partners and move on.
Yep, check out the shop. They've got a lot of awesome shirts coming out over the next couple of weeks. And hats. Use Unverified for 15% off. We want to send a shout-out as well to Rico here, the Fathead Studio, for allowing us to be inside of the studio. Maybe changing here over the next couple of weeks, but we'll get to that when we get to that. David, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think a good week, pretty information-heavy show, and I think we only scratched the surface, so a lot more still to come. I mean, thermal's going to be what it's going to be. We will see. I mean, I think at the very least it's going to give us a lot to talk about next week. I'm looking forward to calling a few sessions with the boys at IndyCar Radio, and I'm looking forward to getting up to Detroit for the secret meeting. And yeah, Tony, I'm looking forward to listening to your Nolan Siegel interview. So I think we're putting in the work. My God, we're finally back. It feels like things are finally ramping up, and we are getting ready. I'll tell you what.
I'm ready to start and stay on the gas and not start.
We're on the gas. The blue envelopes came out. It feels great outside. We got thunderstorm warnings again. It's almost May, baby.
And how about them Pacers? How
about them Pacers?
They locked into the play-in, at least. They are locked in.
Big-time win last night without their starters on the road at Minnesota. For Kyle, David, I'm Tony. Thanks for listening to Unverified. We'll see you here next Tuesday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, inside of the Fatheads Eyewear Studio.